Alright everyone, we just had, in my opinion, the best chapter, not including Ginny's death and the end of Kuma's consciousness. If we ignore those two chapters from Kuma's flashback, the two most dramatic chapters, I think, in post-time skip One Piece, if we ignore those two chapters, then I would say that this chapter was the best chapter of Egghead Island. It's pretty tight because Egghead Island has covered a ton of amazing chapters. I mean, the last time I felt this excited was Saturn's Devil Fruit form reveal, or maybe it might not be a Devil Fruit, watch out for next week's video, but Saturn's at least demonic form reveal. This chapter, I think, matches that just in terms of the hype of the 5 Gorosei, all 4 of the Gorosei arriving, but at the same time, just the sheer excitement and joy that I'm getting from seeing Luffy absolutely dominate top-tier opponents like Saturn and Kizaru at the same time. Because this is something completely unprecedented. And I'm going to spend a good chunk of this chapter talking about this because it just feels so crazy and so mind-blowing to see Luffy fighting like this. This feels almost like endgame Luffy. We're in the final saga. Like, when we first got the first battle, the first round of Luffy versus Kizaru, right? That went in a way that felt satisfying from what I remember to most people. I found it satisfying. I think the fight itself was okay. It was mildly entertaining. But it felt as though, this is cool. This is Luffy. He's handling himself well against an admiral. He's going toe-to-toe with the admiral, and ultimately he seems to get the better of Kizaru. By the end of the fight, we got lots of, Kizaru defenders saying that, well, Kizaru wasn't actually trying to kill Vegapunk, so he was holding back because he didn't want to. Spoilers, Kizaru was 100% trying to kill Vegapunk, and Vegapunk is now dead because Kizaru was not holding back at any point whatsoever. So that argument was obviously terrible. But at the same time, the fight between Luffy and Kizaru the first time around, it felt, I would say, it was an adequate showing for Luffy. It felt right. It was like, okay, Luffy, you can clearly an admiral can't just take him down nowadays. This is good to see. We're happy to see Luffy fighting like this. It feels right. But what we got this chapter didn't just feel right. It felt empowering. It felt just awe-inspiring. It felt just as though we've seen the pinnacle of everything that we've wanted to see for Luffy for so long. Because we've known we've been following his journey for so long. Since all the way back in Sabaody, where, he was helpless against admirals and Pacifista and Kuma and everything like that. He was telling his crew to run. We've seen the lows, the falls, the hardships that he's gone through, the training, the tribulations that he's been through post-time skip, going through opponent after opponent that's pushed him to his limits, and getting stronger and stronger. And last arc, when he finally awakened, and it was the second coming of Joy Boy, I think within the context of the Wano arc, we didn't fully realize just exactly what Luffy had tapped into right there. Partly because we really didn't see Luffy at his best for most of his Gear 5th versus Kaido fight. Luffy was established to be just barely clinging on to life throughout that fight. He was at 1%, 0% health, so it was basically, just extremely weakened Luffy that was fighting Kaido right then, as was clearly established. And Luffy was goofing around, getting used to his abilities for most of the fight. And we only really got to see him get serious against Kaido at the very end, where he pulled out Bajrangan and won. So we didn't get the full picture at that point in time. We're like, okay, Bajrangan, that's pretty crazy. When Luffy really tries in Gear 5th, he can do stuff like that. But this fight, this is the first time that we're seeing, this fight against Kizaru and Saturn. This is the first time that we're seeing Luffy serious in Gear 5th. A healthy, fresh Luffy getting serious in Gear 5th from the beginning, and really flexing what he can do with the Nika powers. And it is just night and day from his first battle with Kizaru. That one was cute. That one was nice. Luffy's goofy, he's goofy, he's joking around, he's being lighthearted, he's doing a lot of jokes and gags with Kizaru, and ultimately Luffy does get the better of him. But this right here, this feels like the Luffy that can actually bring the dawn of the world. This Luffy feels like it makes sense why the Gorosei were so terrified of Luffy awakening this ability back in Wano. Because the full potential of what he can do when he actually starts abusing the power and going all out, we have never seen any character in One Piece do anything even remotely close to what Luffy just did this chapter. Let that sink in. There is not a single thing that any character in One Piece has done that is remotely close to the feats that Luffy showed this chapter. Nobody in the series, I think even the most hardcore Yonko fans, I could not imagine them before this chapter saying, oh, you know what, Kaido would low diff 2 admirals at the same time. Saturn is, it seems, essentially admiral level, maybe a little plus minus, we don't know exactly, but he seems to be about Kizaru's level, give or take, maybe more, maybe a little bit less, depending what you think, but it's essentially like Luffy's fighting 2 admirals, right? 2 admirals that are trying to kill him, and he is toying with them, I think that even people weren't, I don't know if people even believe that like Prime Roger or Prime Whitebeard would be toying with two admirals at the same time. Like low diffing them. Like treating them like they're nothing. Spinning them around like pancakes and tossing them around, right? If there wasn't a ship there, Kizaru would have just died. Kizaru would just be dead if there was no marine ship there. Saturn, we know, is, for whatever reason, he has extreme regeneration, possibly immortality, possibly a product of the immortality operation or something like that, but at the same time, Saturn's no challenge to Luffy. Luffy can't quite put him down, but he's able to, mess him up pretty effortlessly and basically do whatever he wants with him. There's a reason that Saturn ultimately had to call in 4 other Admiral level characters at the end just to get past Luffy and put a stop to this. Again, I want everyone to be really honest with themselves. Before this chapter, I've seen some people go as far as arguing that, like, a Yonko could take 2 admirals at the same time. I've seen some people go that far and be like, yeah, I could see Kaido taking 2 admirals at the same time. I think Shanks could beat 2 admirals at the same time. I don't think I've ever seen anybody arguing, like, even that Roger would effortlessly overpower 2 admirals at the same time. Like it was nothing, the way that Luffy did this chapter. You read this chapter and you tell me it's not Luffy just effortlessly taking care of Kizaru and Saturn at the same time. This is the full... Well, actually, it's not even the full potential of Luffy, because he's not even trying that hard as far as we can tell. He dealt with these 2 Admiral-level characters so easily that we don't even know what the full extent of what he could be doing right now. Could he handle all 5 Gorosei when they show up? I don't think so. I think that would be a little bit too insane. I think that's just like all 5 Gorosei plus Kizaru at the same time taking on Luffy. At that point, it's like, let's just fast forward to Luffy fighting Imu, because nothing in the rest of the story is going to be a challenge for him. But, the challenge has been posed. 6 Admiral level fighters, essentially. At least Admiral level fighters, right? Versus Luffy. I do think that now would be a great time for the rest of the Straw Hat crew to finally become relevant. At least Zoro and Sanji, hopefully. I mean, Sanji's already there. Zoro is out fighting at the exact location where the Gorosei are trying to get to, so hopefully we get to see some interaction there. So I am hoping that other characters do become relevant. I don't imagine Luffy just taking care of 6 Admiral level characters at the same time, because at that point it's just absurd. Like, Luffy will have skyrocketed past every other character in history at that point if he's capable of doing that. Imu would be the only remaining challenge in the story. But still, Luffy this chapter doing things that no other character in the story, not even close, has done, right? Again, remember, like, Whitebeard taking on admirals 1v1 at Marineford and, like, generally being able to handle them. That was exciting for its time. Like, that was kind of up there for its time. Luffy's wiping the floor effortlessly with 2 at a time. Whitebeard couldn't even do that. Obviously, that was weakened Whitebeard, old, aging Whitebeard. We don't know how Prime Whitebeard would do, obviously a lot better, but my point is, like, you can go through the series, nobody's doing this type of thing. I mean, freaking Big Mom. Big Mom could barely handle Kid and Law at the same time. Like, she was going high extreme difficulty with Kid and Law, and they're bums who barely even know hockey. Luffy is wiping the floor, low diffing 2 Admiral level characters, 2 characters who are clearly stronger than Kid and Law by a good margin. It's just insane to think the gap between where Luffy once was and what we considered to be, some of the strongest characters in the series, and what Luffy's doing now. Because, again, he's just left so many other characters in the dust. I'm sure there are still characters that are, I'm sure that we haven't seen the best of what Shanks can do. We haven't seen the best of what Mihawk can do. We haven't seen the best of what Dragon can do. But from everything we've seen so far, Luffy has left it in the dust. This chapter just did that. So this is easily one of my favorite chapters in One Piece, post-time skip, Egghead Island, One Piece period. I love this chapter. Just made me feel so excited for the end of the story, and the things that we're going to get to see the main character do, but also just how far he's come. So, that aside, the time limit. I think the time limit is a brilliant idea. Liked getting all the shots across the world. I love the time limit because it sets the win condition for the crew. I don't expect them to defeat all the Marines and all the Gorosei right here this arc, but the win condition for the crew, like what we would count as a big W, is if they can hold them off for 10 minutes for Vegapunk's message to go out. If they've successfully done that, then they've essentially won here, right? It doesn't matter if the Marines and whatever they're able to claim Egghead. It doesn't matter, because the damage has been done. The message of Vegapunk, the truth about the world, will have been revealed to the rest of the innocent citizens of the world, and that is going to screw over everything that Imu, the Gorosei, the Celestial Dragons, and the world government have been working on keeping under wraps for the last 800 years. That would be the trigger for the rest of One Piece, the rest of the final conflict, the entire finale of the story to start playing out. So if they're able to hold out these 10 minutes, they win, essentially, right? That's their win condition. So I love that Oda set those stakes. I love that he set the time limit, and just the tension that comes with so many Gorosei showing up at the same time. It's just unprecedented. Like, the last time that we had this many Admiral level characters, like 6 Admiral level type characters, all lined up on one side, ready to fight the protagonists. You know when that was? Marineford. Marineford, that was the last time we had, 3 Admirals, Mihawk, Garp, Sengoku, and stuff like that all lined up on one side, plus obviously a bunch of other characters. But the fact that it's just happening out of the blue right now, with no build-up, no extended drama or setup for it, for a huge war. It's just all happening right now at Egghead, and the only characters to defend against it are the Straw Hat crew. That is insanely exciting. Insanely exciting. I love how Oda has been ramping up the stakes of this arc. Just every time it feels like, okay, maybe things are going a bit too easy for them, it's like, well, what if I triple the problem? Think Saturn and Kizaru are bad? Well, now I gotta deal with 6 of these characters. So I don't know. This climax is setting up to be absolutely amazing. We do have other factors, like the ancient robot might come into play, so we know that we've been waiting on that. It felt like we didn't need it, but now we definitely need it to come in clutch. Dory and Broggy, maybe they can contribute in some way. Zoro and Sanji, would love to see them get some action in here as well. It would be very embarrassing if Zoro is still just fighting Lucci for the rest of the arc, while his captain is single-handedly handling all 6 Admiral level opponents. And then Sanji, of course, he already was almost in the fray. He helped against Kizaru for a moment, and then we got blue-balled a little bit. He didn't really get to do that much more, so I'd love to see him get involved again. And then the rest of the Straw Hats, please let them do something. Please let them do something. It doesn't have to be fighting Gorosei, it doesn't have to be fighting Kizaru, but just let's get them to do something crucial here. I would love to see that. So, love this chapter, and before we finish, let me read from the voice of the people, my top tier of patrons. So Dice said, the constant flipping of advantages between both groups really feels like a war. Don't think any other arc has quite been like this. So that's a really good point. I think that the Marineford War definitely did feel like that. It felt like there was moments of momentum for the Whitebeard pirates on one end, and then that momentum being crushed by the, Marine side on the other end. And then the Whitebeard pirates getting second life breathed into them with, Luffy awakening Conqueror's Haki and everything like that, and them getting their final push and saving Ace, and then that being snatched away yet again. So the Marineford arc, I feel like, did have that. But then if I think of more recent storylines, like large-scale storylines, yeah, I feel like this one has been one of the most back and forth, because, initially it's getting going, and it's, Luffy versus Kizaru, round 1, and it's, Luffy's handling himself fine. It didn't feel like there was much tension, because the tone of the fight was kind of funny and light. And then Saturn goes off, Saturn transforms, and suddenly it's like this monster has just appeared. Luffy's out of commission for the moment because he's run out of gear 5th. The Strats can't do anything against Saturn. And then the tables flip again. Kuma comes in. Luffy's able to rejuvenate himself, right? Now the Strats are fighting back. Like, Sanji's blocking Kizaru's laser. Luffy's beating up Saturn. Then Luffy's handling them both at once. Vegapunk dies, so things seem kind of dire, but Luffy's really giving it to Saturn and Kizaru. And just when it seems like Luffy's kind of got them under wraps, Saturn calls in the rest of the Gorosei. All the other Gorosei. And now suddenly things seem like very lopsided in the bad guys' favor. So, yeah, just the constant back and forth, and I think getting moments of catharsis, getting moments of just feel-good wins for the heroes, and kind of getting to see them slap the bad guys around before then having the stakes, the challenges that they're up against getting doubled down, and it's like, okay, you dealt with that, now can you deal with this? I think that sort of snowball effect that Oda has been doing has been phenomenal this arc, so I would never have predicted that Egghead would get this high stakes and deal with this level of opponents by the end of it, but here we are, so let's see how the Strats get out of this one. And that's all for this week. I will talk to you all later.